So welcome to the Gen Bio podcast. This is our second episode.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
I'm thrilled, excited, and happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah.
Honor.
Well, so I'm Taylor Capito. I'm CEO and founder of GenRAIT, and I'm here today with Micha Breakstone, founder of Somite. Would you like to introduce yourself, Micha, and tell us a little bit about yourself and your background? I know, similar to me, for those who watched the previous podcast with Elia, I'm a tech person gone bio, right? And you're also, of a similar flavor. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that?
For sure, I am. First, it's a great setting, so it's super professional and fun. I'm kind of wondering, should I be looking at you? Should I be looking naturally, kind of?
We can move around.
Okay, awesome. So,
well, and funny thing, we just sat down in here. It was a little bit of a comedy of errors getting here. I think Mike and I bumped into each other in the lobby, just getting here at the same time about 5 minutes ago. I should not be trusted with female beauty products. So I tried to straighten my hair today. I ripped out a chunk of hair, burnt my forehead. I don't know if it's visible, but but here we are. We made it.
And I have not shaved. I was going to call you out on that, but you were, yeah. So I'm Micha Breakstone. Indeed, as you mentioned, Taylor, my background is more computational. So my master's is in mathematics, undergrad in computer science, and a PhD in cognitive sciences. And then I've built most of my career as an entrepreneur in the tech space. So kind of did AI companies before people knew how to spell AI or what it meant, and was lucky enough to see some nice success there early days. So built and sold a company called Chorus AI for about $600 million. It was a terrific exit, which allowed me to do things that are kind of more grandiose and more ambitious, like Somite. Yeah, it's
I'm really excited about Somite, by the way, and I can't wait for you to share with everyone. So the purpose of the Gen Bio podcast, just to further introduce, is we're really looking at the frontier of biology and where biology and technology intersect, but that frontier, what the future could be, right? The things that are being unlocked right now, because you mentioned AI, right? So I have a similar story. I mean, my company's name, GenRAIT, GenRAIT, stands for Genomic Revolutionary AI Technology. And when I came up with the name, everybody was like, that's a weird name. And now it's like, AI, you can't walk down the street without seeing a billboard with AI on it anymore. And so it's everywhere. But that's beautiful.
Yeah. I think we're, first of all, yes, AI is obviously all the rage now. I think looking at the intersection of biology and AI is still up and coming. I mean, the Nobel Prize was just awarded in chemistry for AlphaFold, as I'm sure you know, which has brought a lot of attention. But I think there's a huge opportunity for AI in the core sciences, including biology. So I'm really excited for that. And kind of when I was thinking about what my next company would be doing, I was looking at the intersection of AI and an area that is still ripe with a huge opportunity for transformation, I guess.
Yeah, and so how do you feel like your background in technology and AI and doing things on the frontier but not in biology, applying that to the biological field and sciences, how do you think that has shifted your perspective, or do you think that it's brought a different touch to how you see the industry?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, look, first and foremost, I'm a company builder, and a lot of these things do translate from company to company, industry to industry. Not everything, and I've been surprised along the way about what it means to build a company in the biotech space or tech bio space, and different players, same names, like VCs are called VCs, but they're different entities, and they think about funding differently.
Explain that a little bit.
Sure.
Just.
Yeah. So you kind of, when you go out and fundraise for standard tech company, there's a playbook. You take X money for Y%, usually somewhere between 25 and 35% of the company. You give it away, and that happens every round, basically, unless you're doing extremely well or very poorly. In biotech, it's different. People are not betting necessarily on you or on your team, but rather on a molecule or therapy or sometimes even a market, a platform of therapies. So the risk profile is very different. They rightfully perceive themselves as taking a much larger risk, and also to some extent the nature, the profile of the CEO is very of the founders influences the trajectory or the outcome of the company much less. So you're looking at a very different ecosystem in terms of funding and what people are looking to take from you and get from you at the company. So that's one example. So as I was saying, there's a lot of things that do translate between company and company, industry and industry, but some things that don't. For myself, I'm a company builder first and foremost. I've my experiences in machine learning AI that meant something very different. Kind of 15 years ago, when kind of before deep learning was prevalent, and then kind of with the inflection point of deep learning, kind of call it 2012 to 14, things started to move quicker, and today it's all about foundation models and
so just on your whole journey, I know for me, even though the vision is the same, right? Just learning how to navigate that landscape as a tech founder in the bio space. I mean, we're also tech bio, a little different, but we've had to pivot. We've had to do, make changes in terms of how we service the market, things like that, especially with AI becoming prevalent so quickly. Even as an AI company, I feel like you could barely keep bearings. It's even intimidating to me. How has your journey been so far with Somite?
Tumultuous, with a positive gradient. I think so. We founded the company about a year and a month and a half ago, and I was the first check-in. At the beginning, kind of, it was just me and co-founders, scientific co-founders.
Same with me.
Yeah, so it's the beginnings are kind of what are you building and how are you building and what are you kind of what is your product. I think we've matured tremendously across the board, everything from understanding the market to what we're building, what the offering is, how we position, what the narrative is, et cetera, and we've taken in a nice amount of funding to allow us to operate really well. And kind of there's ups and downs, like with every company. I think some amazing ups were receiving the orphan drug designation from the agency, from the FDA, was a huge recognition of kind of that what we're doing is real and meaningful. And then some more meaningful called breakthrough moments when we showed that we're able to generate data in a breakthrough manner, kind of hopefully edging towards 3 orders of magnitude more than what is possible today. And just last week, off from an offsite with the leadership team and thinking through with kind of 10 of the top developmental biologists and sysbio and AI people in the world, thinking through what the trajectory of the company should look like. It's just really energizing to see incredible people in the same room and thinking together. So.
Oh yeah, and so this, I guess, takes us back to the beginning. Like it's so exciting what's possible in biology. What you're doing with Somite is really cool. Can you give if you were to give a 1-sentence explainer to your grandma?
To my grandma, to my grandma,
or your dad.
The most simplistic way would be to we're trying to build spare parts for the human body. That's kind of overly simplify. A nicer way of saying it is we're leveraging AI to decipher, understand how cells differentiate, and use that to usher in a new age of human repair, so that one can use their own cells to basically create novel medicines, so novel therapies. And the space, the search space for the different cells is absolutely huge, and it's a problem that lends itself very naturally to artificial intelligence. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're not doing the same thing, but we're leveraging AI to understand gene expression, which is like, if we talk about these two use cases, you're talking about literally being able to leverage technology to create new tissues, which is just so cool. I mean, obviously, not directly. Explain that as well. Yeah.
So at a first stage, we're taking iPSCs, induced pluripotent stem cells, and guiding them towards a specific fate. Yeah. Our flagship program is a satellite cell program for a horrible disease called Duchenne, DMD. And what we do is we graft these satellite cells into mice that suffer from the disease, or rather we've injured to emulate them suffering from the disease. And those human cells actually graft beautifully into the mice, and within 3 months we see about 80% of the muscle regenerated and full function restored, full force restored. So in that respect, we're not engineering tissue, but we are definitely guiding cells from pluripotency all the way to maturity.
Well, this is huge because, for like fellow nerds listening to this, like myself, I had, prior to ever coming into biology, when I was in tech, read the different studies about people reverse engineering, cells back to stem cells. But then it was very, very, very difficult to then culture it further into like a new type of tissue, right? So they were reversing they reversed engineered skin cells and back into stem cells. They coaxed them back into stem cells into reproductive cells. Yeah. But this had a really high fail rate, I remember.
Yeah. I didn't realize I was going to be speaking with an expert, so you know more about this.
I'm not an expert. Well, I guess we'll probably have a mixed audience, but the really like cool thing, the implication of this and why this was so interesting to me, it was like, okay, so we can take skin cells, although I worry about like mutation rates and things like that. Like, I'm sure the type of tissue matters, right? Because the DNA will degrade over time. But they took skin cells and they basically turned them into eggs and sperm.
Right. So
even they engineered entire gonads. I think one company did. Yeah. And this was like a huge thing for reproduction in the future, and yet it had so many risks involved that there was fear because of how difficult what you're saying is to do. And so the idea that you can model and prevent some of those bad effects that can happen when reverse engineering a cell is just really, really cool.
Yeah, thank you. I think so. In 2006, Yamanaka and a few other, I think one other researcher discovered how to indeed reverse a dermis cell back to pluripotency. He received the Nobel Prize in 2012 for it. Yeah. And kind of that did issue a huge amount of hope that kind of, okay, so if you can create pluripotency, of course you'll be able to navigate a cell to its to maturity or a specific fate, but it turns out that it's much harder to tell a cell how to reach a specific fate than to reverse it back in time. Partially because it's a team sport, cell differentiation. It needs a full colony around it of cells to kind of different signals and different timing, and part of it just because even when the 4 Yamanaka factors are induced, so it's not, I think, 1 out of 10,000, 100,000, I don't remember, cells actually achieves pluripotency. The rest kind of so the idea is that once you're able to discern a specific protocol, namely a cascade of signals, on day X add this type of reagent, et cetera, you're avoiding all the worries of teratomas and stuff like that, just because it's just following the natural trajectory of cell differentiation.
Very cool. what led you there?
Yeah,
because that's like what led we all have our origin story, right? Especially us tech founders gone bio focused people. Like for me, it was I had autoimmune issues and I grappled with those, and I got myself healthier, and then I went off the deep end into research and bio. I even have a hyperbaric chamber in my apartment.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yes, I do. I have a 1.5 atmosphere one.
Oh, wow. That's
I was able to
I didn't know that those were possible. Like I thought you had to it's like industrial.
Mine is a soft shell chamber.
Okay.
So I can explain to you after our podcast how to get one. Like it's actually, they're not that expensive, and it's a cool thing to have because it really did help me with my inflammation.
Cool.
But I went off into the deep end of exploring biology, and I got myself healthier. And what I found is like the thing that led me here was just how hard it was to do that.
Yeah.
But how much data we have and how unusable it was. And so that's my origin story. It kind of I was just frustrated.
Yeah.
And I wonder, do you have something along the same lines, or?
So less more prosaic, I guess. Less personal. First, I think regarding what you just said, I think the CEO of NVIDIA, Jensen, has this saying that he's been saying for a few years now. He says that biology now has the opportunity to transform from a science to an engineering discipline. And when something lends itself or becomes an engineering discipline, it lends itself to exponential improvement. And I think kind of that's an opportunity that I identified. I spent my life in AI. I did language models before they were large. When they were small, it was acoustic models and language models and marrying them together, and how do you weight them and how do you bias them and how do you merge them into a large graph, etc. So this is kind of, between 2012 and 2019, basically I was doing. So I understand the trajectory that AI has been taking with language, both with speech, language, etc. And looking at where things are now, it's not that language is solved, but you can ask ChatGPT or Claude or whatever to translate between any two languages, and it'll do a pretty damn good job. Probably we passed the Turing test a while back, so there's a lot kind of the question is what the near horizons are for language. Again, my origin story is actually natural language processing, so that's what kind of...
That's a big deal. And kind of what I heard from you just now is that you want to take that and apply that to life, right?
For sure, yeah. So exactly. So I think the areas where there are still huge questions that are unanswered. I think once in an interview I was asked about what we were doing, and I said, well, it's LLMs, but the first L is not large, it's life. So life language models, right? The languages that cells speak to each other. So the origin story for this company is I was just looking for a very interesting problem at the intersection of AI and biology, because I wanted to do something that actually improved people's lives. We had done very nicely for ourselves, and really, once we were comfortable, I really wanted to make sure that kind of I leave a legacy behind me and then do something impactful. So I reached out to a good friend of mine who's a professor at Harvard Medical School and asked him if he had anything interesting at the intersection of AI and biology, and he said, we're good friends, why ruin it? So I asked again and again, finally introduced me to the chair of the genetics department at Harvard Medical School, and another National Academy of Science, National Academy of Medicine member. And later on, we happened upon the head of the fundamental AI group at MIT, and then another professor from University of Washington who is also an expert in single-cell RNA sequencing. So together we put together this incredibly strong founding team. And I spent probably 3 to 6 months, depending on how you count it, diving into learning about biology, which basically meant reading review articles and kind of books like The Song of the Cell. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I haven't heard of that book, but it sounds quite interesting.
Yeah, it's by the same author that wrote The Emperor of All Maladies. It's a really, very good book. So and very accessible. So reading papers, reading books, and mostly discussions with world-renowned scientists on kind of the potential and what happens when you marry AI with kind of deep or core biology.
Yeah, so it is crazy how much information you can get just on the internet. I mean, I had a similar experience reading Mukherjee's book about genomics. Yeah.
Wait, what was it called?
I think I feel like it was, I forget what it's called actually, but I read it. Like it was several years ago.
But I think he's the same. Wait, what's his first name? Doesn't matter.
I do know it, but I'm like blanking right now.
It's okay.
But I read the book. I mean, it was several years ago that I read it, and it just walks you through the history of. It might even just be called the history of the genome or something like that. It walks you through the history of genomics. Right, all the way to.
The reason I ask, by the way, is I think he's the same author of the Song of the Cell.
When you said the Song of the Cell, his name popped in my head.
Yeah.
And that, I think that it might be, and I think I was looking into getting that book. I mean, you can get these things on Amazon, but the crazy thing now, I used to read books all the time, and I definitely used to read a lot of research papers. Now I use AI and I get summaries of things or like key points, right? So this is another like interesting way that things have changed. But when you were talking about that, I was just thinking, I mean, yeah, it's like you can do that now. We can educate ourselves in these things, like as tech people into the biology space. But also when you were talking, when I was listening to you talking about, you're rewiring the fate of a cell. Right, you're remapping its trajectory of what it will become.
I'm not sure if is correct, because it's not that we're taking a mature cell and reprogramming it. Right, we're not using transcription factors to reprogram a cell, which is, there are companies out there that are doing that and doing that really nicely.
Well, so then you're determining the fate.
Right.
Okay,
exactly.
okay. You're writing the fate of the cell, and you're creating that. Like you're modeling that generatively. So. With that, I was then thinking about, just human beings in general. And this is a little bit off topic, but I thought of your story, my story, becoming founders, and I don't think I could do anything else. And I was listening to you talk about like, I just needed to solve problems. When we're talking about biology and we're talking about life and we get into these generative solutions, it's kind of funny. Like I do really feel like what makes a person like me or you just go and have this endless need to go solve things. It's kind of crazy.
It's I can share my personal experience if you want.
Absolutely.
So first, sometimes I wake up and ask myself, why the hell do I need this? It's like there are difficult days.
Me yesterday morning, I had a longer last couple of days, so I totally. Yeah,
I hear you. I think for me, I'd never thought I would build a company. I never even thought of it. I spent a couple of years at MIT doing some research, an invited kind of research student, and I was walking. I was sure I was going to be a novelist. That's what I thought I was going to be.
I was going to be. I actually wrote a book when I was 15.
Awesome.
And I created this whole index. I'll have to show you that as well. It has I created a world built, and I thought I was going to be a novelist. I started another one in college, and I also never thought I was going to go into tech or be a founder. It's so funny.
So I wrote my first novel when I was never published at the age of, I think, 21 or something like that, and I submitted it to all of these.
Mine was never published either, by the way.
Yet. To all of these publishing houses, and one of the top ones. I was born and raised in Israel. Got back to me and said, let's meet for lunch, and the editor-in-chief there, one of the top editors, said, look, I'm not sure you're ready yet, but when you grow up, you definitely can, you have the talent to become a real author. And then I met her like 20 years later at some tech. She moved into, turns out, to whatever, an area of tech. She's like, so you look so much, you've grown so much. I was like, the last person I went to tell, to share me that I've got, because it like was my dream to become a novelist. So it was like, oh.
We can still be novelists.
Yes, we can.
Right?
Although it's with AI now, it's the question is when the first great novel will be published by AI, or will be written by AI. I mean, we're there with other forms of art, right? Definitely painting, drawing.
Yeah, well, I mean, it'll be like more of like a premium good to have a human written. No.
So exactly, I 3.5 years ago, almost 4 years ago, when my first daughter was born, I wrote her for her birthday. I wrote the adventures of her and her dog, like in a beautiful kind of rhyming story. It was really, really nice. I wrote it in Hebrew. And my wife said, well, I don't understand it. So I translated it to English, and she was like, well, who in India did you hire to quickly do that? Because it was so like, but the joke is now, like, I'll be telling Ellie when she's, 15 or 20 years old, I said, look, this is actually handmade or human crafted, right? Yeah. Not like, God knows where we'll be then. But so we've so my story, I was walking down the Infinite Hall at MIT, and I saw this poster that said, if you're not embarrassed to show us your demo, you've waited too long. I was like, wow, that's pretty cool, and I can build a quick demo for an application that I was thinking of. So that's kind of, and then at the time, this was 2010, I want to say, the idea was basically Duolingo, but before Duolingo, like 4 or 5 years before, smartphones had just come out. Everybody made fun of me. I ended up losing most of my money and many other things trying to found a company. And so naturally, like any good founder, I was addicted and kind of what's it called? A glutton for punishment. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think that there is some special aspect of that. It's like, but it goes back to not fearing failure and not fearing embarrassment.
I fear failure every day.
You fear it. That's a very good point. Not being a slave to your fear of failure.
Yeah, that's true.
Right. Yeah. Overcoming the fear of failure. Like I fear failure too. I have to push myself into like doing things. Like I write music too, and I'll freestyle sing in random places now, because like I have to like push myself like the next level to get over any kind of like fear of quote unquote embarrassment, because I need to keep those skills sharp. Mm-hmm. Right? Because that is like the biggest thing of being an entrepreneur, is that you, like, when that starts slipping, then you're not innovating fast enough. Yeah.
I just wrote a piece. I read a weekly or bi-weekly for Inc. magazine. The last piece was called the secret powers that govern the fate of startups, and it starts with like startups die in two ways, gradually and then immediately or abruptly, like basically. Referencing Hemingway point about how startups, I think it was for him, it was how you go bankrupt. But for startups, or something like that, for startups, I think it's just a matter of missed momentum, missed opportunities that end up compounding over time. So kind of just moving quickly into everything and that pace is hard to keep up. And
Well, it was like, I mean, given that you're pushing really on the frontier, and obviously, like, there's just the general things that make it difficult to run a company, especially a biotech or tech bio company, where the data is bigger, the costs are higher, everything's harder. There's the general things. But what would you say is your biggest challenge right now? Like, what keeps you up at night, and what makes it the most difficult for you, or your biggest barrier you feel like to get this dream that you have in your head out in the real world?
Yeah, there are a few, but I think one of the very top ones is the special nature of the company. We're a company that is we're taking a full stack approach. So we're generating the data, training the models on the data, and then identifying the assets that we believe are most de-risked and most lucrative as far as possible into clinic. And being able to tell that story in a compelling way is not trivial. It's like actually very complex, because like, are you an AI company? Are you a hardware company for generating data? And if so, or are you both? And then wait, what therapeutic also? Like, why are you doing that to yourselves? Like, and so telling a compelling story in a way that we believe is actually real, but like speaking with different stakeholders, like how do you actually how do you tell a story in a way that makes sense to different, completely disparate stakeholders? Like, so, you know, VCs, speaking with biotech VCs, they love, you know, clinical data and they love what we're doing, but like, what is this AI and why are we paying a premium for it? And the AI people are like, this is great, but why assume the risk of going through the agency?
Yeah, I'm not even as into the hardware or the you know, the end product side as your platform, and I struggle with that because I mean we're talking about still a lot more like upfront effort and complexity, because it's even just with the data. I mean, the data is just larger and there aren't existing solutions, and the relationships are much more complex in biology, and there's a lot of different possibilities. So it takes time to develop AI in this space. And but with like a SaaS or like a software element, and you kind of break investors' brains a little bit.
Yeah.
They want to like see the one model, the traditional model in bio, but it's exactly what you said. It's becoming a data science. It's becoming an engineering problem. And like we have now digitized biology effectively, right? As much as like significantly, and we're doing it more and more very rapidly, faster than even the industry can handle. Like in genomics, like I'm sure you've seen the graph, the Moore's law.
Yeah.
Right. And so people's brains.
I think I heard recently, sorry for interjecting, I heard recently the, what is it, not the Moore's law, but Orem's law, which is the opposite. Things are going to get more complex, double the complexity, double the hardship, and things move twice as slowly in biology than in like the opposite, the reciprocal of the CS one.
It's because similar to investors, the technology is changing so exponentially fast that people being trained and produced out of universities to do this work, the work is shifted by the time they're out of the institution, right? And so there's a problem, but a massive opportunity. Mm-hmm. And what I think we're going to see, just like with a lot of industries with AI, is we're going to see a completely new industry. Right?
100%.
It's not going to be the same. But when you're talking to investors that have invested in this old model, and now we're talking about this like foundational new technology that necessarily will shift the entire healthcare industry.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to wrap their heads around that, because it effectively means that a lot of the ways that companies operate, a lot of the existing value chains, they are going to die. They're not going to go into nothing. They're going to evolve into these new offerings and value chains and opportunities. And but like trying to wrap your head around that and trying to understand like new markets and new models and we've seen this change happen in other industries. This happened in e-commerce and banking. Banks used to, or like pre-PayPal, pre-Stripe, like all these companies, e-commerce was completely different. And banking, people used to, even after the digital revolution in e-commerce, at banks, they had their own VMs. And then suddenly digital banking blew up and they all had to migrate into cloud providers like AWS. And so like we've seen all these big shifts happen in other industries. They happen really, really rapidly. Companies died, platforms broke, but they happened because the technology was there. And so it happened. And I think that shift is going to be present in biology as well. So with that in mind, like looking at the market of today versus like the market of 5 years from now, it's not going to be the same. And what do you imagine that the industry, what biology, what the world effectively will look like in 5 years' time versus now?
It's a wonderful question. I think in contrast to the other industries that you've delineated, even with banking, which is highly regulated, the regulation in biology or in pharma stems from, real fear of hurting people, right? Mm-hmm. So there are good reasons for the industry to move, quote unquote, a bit slower, right? And I do think that 5 years from now, still regulation, and for good reasons, will kind of force some level, basically the level of innovation will not match how quickly things are taken to market. But at the same time, at the earlier stages of innovation, I definitely see things moving much quicker. So I think I mentioned AlphaFold before, that the one, the Nobel Prize. I think a few weeks ago it was made open source. Before that, it was open access, so anybody could go and on kind of a AlphaFold 3 server and see how interactions between proteins and small molecules behaves, what the structure, the folding structure of a protein looks like, etc. Which kind of democratized or at least opened up greatly the ability of any researcher in the world to do real cutting edge work with proteins. And I think we're going to see similar things in other areas. I do think still that clinical trials are clinical trials. I don't think drugs are going to be approved without clinical trials, and so I think and that remains very, very costly for insurance, regulation, etc. So I think we're going to see a lot of novel science. I think the pace of application, I think a lot of good people are going to be moving into these areas, right? Just because as jobs are obviated in kind of other areas, I think these are areas that are going to need to be still very high touch. So I do think we're, in a sense, going to be heading into a golden age of biotech, tech bio.
You mentioned, regulation, governance. Yeah, I don't think we'll take human out of the loop for a really long time. But we'll have research assistant, like AI,
oh, 100%,
right? And then what
100%.
about like all the other applications? Like, do you think that even so maybe not the next 5 years, but maybe 10. I mean, I kind of imagine a world where, you go to a restaurant and the menu filters based on your diet, based on your biology, whatever you have input into the system. I think these things are really possible.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's possible even today in a sense, right? So actually an investor in a couple of companies that do kind of matching, insights to microbiome, for example, stuff like that. So yes, 100%.
It's tough today.
Yeah. I was getting all excited because I thought menu, restaurant, and cell culture, I was like, oh, maybe artificial, cultured meat. I was like, yes, that's the future. I'm vegetarian, so
cultured meat. Yeah. There are people, I was talking to, some people visiting from Asia with the State Department last week, and brilliant people. One of them was working on, cell cultured fish.
Oh yeah,
that's interesting.
I have a fear of fish, but I am a vegetarian. That's a thing. It's called ichthyophobia. I can't pronounce it correctly. I'm really scared of fish, so that's less alluring to me. But but
the chicken is fine.
Oh, chicken is great. Okay. Yeah, I'm just waiting for one not to suffer like in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, right? So.
I raised chickens during the pandemic. And I hatched supermarket quail eggs, and then I raised chickens, and I hatched them too. But I trained my rooster Humphrey how to fly on my shoulder. I'd go up,
Oh, nice.
I don't have them anymore, like because of being a business owner and moving into the city and doing all that. But it makes me think a little bit different. Like I really have some appreciation every time I eat like chicken now, or just meat in general.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I mean, yeah, because the animals aren't treated well, and it makes you. For me, I didn't go vegetarian, but I do like work really hard to get ethically sourced meat when I can and things like that. Yeah, so that's a good feature.
Yeah, I'm a carnivore in disguise or whatever, in hiding. I love meat, but I haven't eaten meat in 20 years.
So what I'm hearing is that you need to be the guinea pig to test out all of the synthetic meats.
Exactly. As I was founding Somite, actually one of the applications we were thinking about was cultured meat, and the reason we didn't go for it was just because it had a very bad reputation in the VC community. It's after many companies had raised hundreds of millions of dollars, but not been able to reduce costs and not been able to. So, but actually, technologies like we're developing at Somite are highly relevant towards that, right? Being able to differentiate cells and later on also grow tissue.
Yeah.
But not the area we went. But for me personally, it was very exciting. I'd really, and kind of to go a tiny bit on tangent, I do think that rather than a guinea pig, I do think that with AI, just like 300-400 years ago, slavery was okay or considered okay or not. Obviously, it was never okay, but considered okay. And I think humanity, the moment it was able to basically provide for itself without that as a resource, I think that kind of changed ethics in a sense. And I think if you look 100 years from now, my guess is that people, or 200 years from now, people will think about, wait, you actually killed an animal to eat it? Like, it's like, so that's...
Well, or at the very least, the ethics of how you treat animals.
Yeah, for sure.
And it therefore will become more of a, like a high-end commodity, right? Like a delicacy kind of thing. And more than that, I mean, okay, so another tangent back to the chicken raising. I mean, I would feed the chicken special things and the eggs would taste good.
Yeah.
Right? Sure. I didn't slaughter any of my chickens. They were like pets, but I would feed them like higher protein diets, different stuff, and just like delicious eggs. And you could control for it. You could A/B test. You could do different things. And
that's really cool.
And so the reason I'm saying this is that like with meat, if we're culturing it and growing it at that nutritionally at that micro of a level, I mean, it kind of opens up a possibility for really good food, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Because you can control like what is fed into those tissues so that they develop.
Yeah.
But then I think of like, okay, one of the things that probably makes muscle meat taste good is like the movement of the muscles. So then we'll have to have like entire markets for creating machinery to like stimulate the muscle meat as it's developing and like things like that. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, I haven't thought that so far, but 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because otherwise it might just not taste good, or it might just be like.
Yeah.
Like I think that was the failing with the
flavor was a huge issue.
The cell culture chicken nuggets, right? They were just like sludge. They could only do chicken nuggets. Yeah. They couldn't do like a chicken breast.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right.
It was
the scaffolding was Yeah, it's that is entirely true. We're very far, so I don't want to, for any of the audience, don't want to misrepresent where at Somite we're not anywhere close there. What we do know is to take a pluripotent stem cell and take it into a specific fate. And not beyond as of now, but I do think that's really.
But this is the vision. In your mind, these things are possible that we can create. We can create biology.
I think.
Right?
Yes, for sure. I think a nice way one of my co-founders says quite beautifully: a cell is like a supercomputer. It has an interface, an API, signals in, signals out, and you could basically imagine a world where you could program this supercomputer to do basically what whatever you want to turn into, and different types of cells, an optimized cell, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I'd love to talk to you more like offline about some of these things because obviously I'm fascinated, but we're working in genomics and it's like.
How did you move to there? Like, sorry, can I ask? Or you don't have to answer. It's your
absolutely.
podcast. So.
I shared some of it when I It's called The Gene. The book is just called The Gene.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry, my brain went back.
No, good.
Yeah, so I was in tech. I graduated from undergrad. I had switched majors 5 times.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I because did you go to, you went to MIT?
I went to MIT, but my PhD is from Israel. So I spent 2 years at MIT. My mentor is a professor at MIT. So he invited me over.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, in the U.S. schooling system, then, which you're familiar, and it's gotten even more so. I mean, a lot of the classes are just like repeats from things that you already know in high school, right? Like basic English, stuff like that. And when I was doing these different majors and degrees, I would get bored and want to try, because I was just wanting to learn. I would take classes that were interesting to me. So I started off in biology. I then went to political science because I'd taken a couple interesting game theory courses and did econ. And then I went into, I think at one point for a brief time, I was a Spanish major.
Oh, cool.
Just because I can speak, or I could speak nearly fluent Spanish. I don't want to say I can anymore. It's been a while. And then I went...
I like to say I'm a semiglot. I can speak approximately a bit of about 6 languages. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, long story short, I took some statistics. I took some programming. I went all over the place in terms of what was my major. But the whole time I kept psychology as my double major. And I was taking all these neuroscience and cognitive psych classes and stats, but with a psych focus and a research focus. And then I graduated and I went into tech, right? Because it's just
wait, you don't have a degree in computer science? I was sure you did for some reason.
No, I actually, funny thing. So I did take programming in undergrad, but when I went into my first tech job, which was at Cisco, I applied and I received a rejection in under 2 minutes. So I was auto-rejected because of my psychology degree. They didn't even look at my skills. So I actually had to reach out to the recruiter. And then I said, I have all the skills for this job. Why did you reject it? And she's like, oh, I'm sorry. It must be because you're a psychology major. And so then I, just for any of those that are listening to this that are applying for jobs, if you get auto-rejected, reach out to the recruiter. Usually it's if you have the skills. Just have a little hustle, as they say. But I ended up getting the job. I started as a consultant because I was out of cycle for hiring. And I was like, well, I want a job now. So they hired me as a consultant and I got a business analyst position, but they wanted to have the person to have some technical fluency. Anyway, long story short, I was doing this business. It's very similar to what I'm kind of doing now in biology, but I was in this business analyst position and it was like a Rube Goldberg system of ridiculousness where I was downloading a report from a SQL database, an Oracle schema, and then I was manually manipulating the report in Excel, connecting the report to Smartsheet from Excel, uploading it, then having other people manually manipulate it, then connecting it to Tableau.
Imagine if you had ChatGPT with Zapier today, it would be it was all automated out.
I did the next best thing. I did obviously some SQL coding myself. They ended up putting me in charge of managing the schema for a while, which was just nuts because it had its own issues. But I was like, okay, I could figure out how to do this, or I could go talk to the data engineering team. And it would take me several hours, if not more than a day. Or I could go talk to the data engineering team and they could probably script this in 5 minutes. So I did that. And my whole job, because I had no fear of automating myself. So my whole job got automated in a day. And then I started doing this with other reporting and wanting to do agile transformations and all this stuff that led to reorgs, and suddenly just all these things were getting automated, and I ended up going into product management. And
cool.
When I went into product management, and of course I worked with other people on this too, but that again is supported why I went into agile and product and forming teams together. So then I went to Palo Alto Networks, where
it's an Israeli company.
Near. Yep. I went to Palo Alto Networks where I pretty much did the same thing, on internal applications, just like would find productivity gaps and solve them. Well, so I was working with my now co-founder doing one application, and
that's cool. So you met. That's really cool.
We met at Palo Alto Networks, and then he's ex NASA, like AI ML guru genius. And one day, I mean, we when we co-founded the company together, we hadn't worked together. We did a flip-flop. We met and worked together at Palo Alto Networks, then he went to Cisco. So it's kind of funny. But when we co-founded the company together, what led me into genomics is, well, first of all, I mentioned my history, like with autoimmune issues. Mm-hmm. I read like everything that you could. I knew I had 2 HLA mutations. Do you know HLA? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So human leukocyte antigen, like things that, the antigen just reflects the output, but like the genes that control those systems, they modulate your immune system and control like how your inflammatory processes work and how you react to inflammation and things. And 10% of people that had my genes got sick, but I was one of, and I was like, well, what about the other 90%? Mm-hmm. Why am I not in that category? And I went like way off the deep end into research. And I just realized that I have an overactive immune system, which can be a blessing because like things like glyphosates and all these things, I have a gluten issue. Mm-hmm. My body was reacting really, really rapidly and really, really strongly to things that are slow killing everybody else. So I like in that way, I've learned to reframe it as kind of like a blessing, but at the time, like I had to learn all these things that should have been easily available. Yeah. So
I'll interject for a second. First, I love the framing or reframing. It's also so important in terms of a founder and resilience, like landing up every morning and like reframing the world in a way that makes sense to be able to find the energy within to
how do you do that? What's an example of a reframe with you? Actually,
wow. I'm looking for one that's distant enough to talk about. Let's see.
And we have to as entrepreneurs because our identities are enmeshed with our business.
100%. It's very difficult to explain like how, like, I mean,
we don't get to have an off day.
No, we don't have an off day. And also like I don't know of any role or vocation where you work as hard. It's like it's really, really so reframing.
Well, like I'll give I recently went through a breakup, and it's like you wake up in the morning and you don't get to for me, I allocate time. I feel into whatever the thing is, like really, really feel it, like heartbreak. Oh, really feel it. And then start like focusing on what I learned. Like how, cause I like who I am. I like where I am. And that's usually the cycle that I go through to reframe. But,
so I have many examples, except they're very like from the last few weeks. So I'm kind of thinking kind of a little too raw or kind of pertain to actual still unfolding events. So I'm going to look a little back. I think there are stories about fundraising always that don't end up working out, and you've invested a huge amount of time with a potential firm to invest. And I remember. A previous company of mine, I remember having received either a term sheet or very similar to that. It was over a phone, so I don't know if it's considered a term sheet or not. Within kind of and having that retracted, and I think the blow was extremely difficult. If I was a first-time founder, I think that's it. I would have thrown the towel in and said, but I think what happened after that, it helped us think through deep issues and reposition the company at the time. So I think it was, I don't want to say it's a blessing in disguise. That's wrong. But it was,
that's helped. How you reframe it.
Yeah. But it was, you had to kind of, I remember just having to really dig in to find the energies of how to get up and continue the next day after investing dozens and dozens and dozens of hours. Yeah, so that's part of it.
One of the things that I try, like, and I've had a similar situation happen, and keeping perspective in that moment is really tough. And one of the things, but if you fixate on it, then you're not doing anything, and then it compounds.
Yeah.
So one of the things I talked to another founder about recently that I do now all the time is I start writing, what can I do? Right? Like whenever I start thinking of like what's wrong, no, what can I do?
Yeah.
Instead of like what, you know, and then there's like the Ferriss, like fear mapping, Tim Ferriss, the fear mapping stuff.
I don't know that.
So it's a similar kind of idea. It's like, okay, what are your fears? What can you do about them, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
yeah, so you were talking about fear earlier in the conversation. I wake up scared.
Yeah.
Like I mean, it's look, companies now, there's no wood here, so I can't knock on wood, but company now is doing like
is that wood? No, it's metal.
No, but you know, we're doing some really great stuff now, and still kind of the thought. I think, who is it? Andy Grove that said only the paranoid survive, or something like that. Yeah. I forget. Maybe I'm mixing things up, but it's scary. There's a lot of unknown. It's I like to say that startups move like dogs, so 7 like dog years, like 7 times like a week at a startup is like 7 weeks in the outside world, and
or
the stakes.
7 years.
Right,
It just depends on the week.
Yeah. It does, and the shifts, the up and downs, the emotions. It's there. It's a lot. It's just it is a lot. You were mentioning before the immune system. So actually, one of the challenges we have at Somite. So for you, it's a mutation. You said an HLA-1.
No, HLA-B27.
Okay.
And I have a mutation on HLA-DQB8.
Okay.
In that region.
Yeah, I don't know those, but
B27 is like associated with a lot of like psoriasis, psoriatic arthritis, ankylosing spondylitis, reactive arthritis, like those conditions. And then the locus that I have, the other mutation, is associated. It's having a pathogenic variant there. Pathogenic, is it? But that's a question. Depends on your environment.
Yeah.
But having a variant like mine and on that locus, it's associated with celiac, with rheumatoid, like things. Yeah. So I've got it both kinds.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, offline you can check out. There's a center for treating patients with various different types of complicated chronic autoimmune diseases.
Well, I had thyroiditis, I had gastritis, I had all these things,
okay.
And to wrap up that story, I was frustrated that it couldn't be that it wasn't being applied in biology after seeing a documentary where that wasn't matching in my head, where I knew that we now had like $300 genomes at the time.
Yeah.
And yet we were still doing everything trial and error. And I want, like, my goal was to how do we streamline all the upstream crap, like data coming in, processing, things that I was really skilled at, familiar with, so that biologists and researchers and people building amazing, like incredible solutions can start at the point of building the solution.
Yeah.
Or like in the case of your company, like these incredible, like humanity altering technologies can exist.
Yeah.
Where we had this bottleneck before it even like makes it before the data is even digitized. Yeah.
No, it's amazing that you mentioned the trial and error. One of my scientific co-founders actually spent, I think, 12 years with a trial and error trying to navigate a cell to a certain state, a satellite cell, basically a muscle stem cell. And it literally 12 years to learn what that trajectory looks like or what the protocol is, and now the ability to do that in so much shorter times and optimize for specific outcomes and specific robustness of cells, etc. is really mind-boggling.
And like the amount of information, the volume of data that we have, and making it accessible and able to, help researchers target, help them apply. Like for genomics, we're creating a model around the genome, but and we're creating like an intelligence layer there called, we're calling it the BioNet.
Oh, cool.
But we want to relate, like one of our initial use cases is relating it back to the research, right? And the work, the papers and things that have been like things already discovered, so that we know where to start looking, right? And for me, it was so frustrating that when I'm someone in tech, systems brained, I had spent all this time trying to figure out how to get myself healthy at a time where that was reasonable, because the genome, to get your whole genome sequenced, and I had what I know is a genetic variant, right? To get your whole genome sequenced was $10,000 at the time that I got, initially diagnosed with issues. And the cost went down to $300. And I'm like, why are we still doing it the same way that we did it when it was 10,000? And I had to go. It's like how you were talking about, like, there's this really rich problem and you had to go solve it. You're like, okay, well, in your case, I want to eat meat again. No, I'm just kidding.
No, I wish that would have been a very good origin story. I was really going to go for it, but it was,
Well, I mean, all the things, right? Like creating new tissues, helping humanity be healthy. I mean, this kind of circles back to the original question I asked you, like with us being tech people looking at this industry and wanting to apply our knowledge and our skill to help it get digitized.
Yeah.
Right. To help people live, like to help human lives, to help people
100%.
live.
Yeah, 100%. There's kind of in my own list of my own values for myself is one of them is leaving the world behind me a slightly more beautiful place. So that's a hope and dream. But yeah, I've moved my entire career. I've moved between disciplines. That's I didn't have 5 undergrad majors, but
I didn't graduate with all 5 degrees. I just switched. I graduated just with psychology because it was my consistent double major.
I'm just tongue in cheek. I think coming people, but to your point, people coming from different disciplines into new ones have a chance of really viewing things from different ways. And my PhD is in cognitive sciences, but my master's was in algebraic topology completely. But coming in from a completely different field allowed me, I think, to see things that were, I don't want to say hidden in plain sight from others, but definitely be able to connect dots that others weren't thinking about. And go ahead.
Well, no, I was just gonna say the interesting thing that we kind of had in common was a really rich understanding of biology, as somebody who went in the computational route.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So the people that I work with are again like sitting. There's a saying that you think that you're successful if you're the least smart person in the room. Yeah. So I've achieved success. Let's put it this way. Like. People are like the depth of the people around me. Again, the chair of genetics department at Harvard, the National Academy of Science members. It's quite humbling, I have to say.
I mean, just in the tech world in general, when you're working with people, or even just next to or adjacent to or the peer to people working on some of the things that are being solved, it is humbling.
Yeah. For sure.
But you constantly learn. Okay, so now we go back to perspective. Right? I think that for me, that's what it is. I love to learn. And I often say, like, I'll be learning until I'm dead. Right? Another thing I also say, which is probably related to why we're founders, going to that tangent as well, is the biggest difference between genius and crazy can be answered with the following question. Is it adaptive? Well, learning is adaptation. And like, adaptation is painful. If you look at the evolutionary history of all the way down to the first cell, right? For that cell to evolve into something else, there had to be pressure on the external environment. Well, we as entrepreneurs, I also say we're kind of like forcing functions for change on society. So we are the pressure. Well, think of how much pressure we have to go through in order to be the pressure for everything else, right? And so like, this is like, if we didn't have that mindset of like what you were talking about, I wake up terrified in the morning sometimes too. And waking up terrified in the morning and we still have to perform. We don't get a lot of time to be down. that requires like constant intentionality on our thoughts and like reframing and like things like that. But for me, the way that I do it is it's always back to learning, and that's how I get there. Like even when I've been in some of my like worst times, with the world falling apart all around me, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to be stronger out of this. This is what I learned. And I'll say like, okay, oh, I was getting complacent. Things were too easy. So I needed this shift so I can be better 5 years from now. Like similar to what you were saying, because I really resonated with that. It ends up being a blessing in disguise. Yeah, if you can reframe it that way and make use out of it, right?
Yeah, that's for sure. There's a lot of beautiful sayings for harder moments. There's a beautiful saying by one of my favorite poets, Leonard Cohen, that says, "There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in." So that's also kind of when things are broken, it's a way for things to shine through as well. But yeah, it's. It's the entrepreneurial route is not one I would recommend. If for kind of first-time entrepreneurs coming my way, I try to dissuade them actually, because I think it's
if they're the real deal, they'll do it anyway.
Exactly, for sure. If there's a real deal, there's no chance in the world that they will listen to me. But it's probably like.
My co-founder, another thing he said to me is, why do you always have to learn by burning your hands?
That's a great say.
And I'm like, because if I wasn't that, I wouldn't have started a company, right?
That's a strong statement.
I know. I mean, well, obviously we can learn from others, but it's exactly what you just said. Like you won't be able to coax the young entrepreneurs out of going out and doing it. They're just going to go do it. That's so if we want to go back to determinism, I think that there's like a recipe that goes into creating somebody like that. But once you're somebody like that, like you said, you're addicted for life.
Yeah, 100%. I can't imagine doing, I can imagine doing something else, but I think it will still be building companies in a different, in a leveraged way, I think. But it's creating and building that excitement, that thrill of actually taking something from 0 to 1. I don't know anything similar to that. I'd love to say I enjoy every day of it. It's not true. I enjoy most days of it, and the good is really, really, really good and satisfying. And kind of thinking about what kind of at the end of the day, what impact will I have had on the world? So that's kind of, especially with all of this AI stuff that we might be replaced anytime now. So
I did an interview with somebody from Forbes yesterday. I don't know if they'll use it or not, but I was talking to her, and she was asking me if project management is going to be automated away. And I was like, well, if you're a project manager and you're using AI, then you're not automated. You're using it as a tool, right? And it's just we're gonna dive more into either the higher like highest order of data science and the creativity, the strategic side of that, or soft human skills.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, surely there will be more and more of that can be automated over time. But what does that free us up to do? Well, if we can keep inventing an upper bound, an upper limit of what we can do, then we're never automated. But that requires, it's intimidating, but it's like if you embrace that and you adopt the technology and integrate it into how you're living your life, then you're not replaced. And I guess it.
So you're an optimist?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's something else I was gonna say on that vein. I'm forgetting what it was, but yes, I'm an optimist. I believe we're on the verge, if we make use of the technology this way, of a future of incredible abundance. Obviously, there's still a desire for notoriety, for impact, and we'll have to find new ways, and that might be challenging, and perhaps how our whole society runs can be or will be rewritten, but we have the opportunity now to make it like a Star Trek kind of future, right? That I think if you even just 10 years ago, people wouldn't have believed that in our lifetimes.
Yeah, I'll tell you an anecdote. 5 years ago, I was on stage and I was giving a talk in Tel Aviv at this bar. It was called Science on the Bar. It's in Hebrew. It sounds better, right? It not rhymes, but it sounds like a whatever. It sounds good in Hebrew. at the end of the talk, I brought up, there was a slide I put up with a survey of when, I think surveying like 200 or 300 top scientists of when AI will reach milestone X and Y and Z. And some of them were like way out, like writing a novel or an article for the New York Times. But others were like, great translation between two languages or summarizing something, whatever. And the kind of the average of these tasks, or what the scientists were looking at, was kind of 20 to 30 years out, if that, right? Some of them were much, much farther away. And I was like, and people asked me at the end, like, Q&A, where do you think? And I was somewhere in the middle, right? Like, and this was, I was at the forefront of AI, like building a company that was extremely successful. Not in academic circles anymore, but definitely acquainted with what academics were saying. And that sounded all real to me. And then a year and a half later, suddenly you have these emerging properties from large language models, and it's like, oh my God, like it's
insane.
It really is.
Did you see 01? That 01 was like,
I haven't played with it yet, but
I haven't either. But I just saw the post. I don't know how legitimate they are, but that it was like avoiding its own deletion.
Oh yeah. I heard that it tried to replicate itself on different servers or something.
Yeah. Which is kind of scary.
Yeah, it is very scary.
I mean, it's like it's acknowledging. I mean, that's where. I mean, this brings in the question: where do we draw the line in the sand and say that it has a will to survive, and that attribute that? Because if you think about what we define as consciousness, I mean, single cells that evolved into us, these multicellular intelligent organisms, share a lot in common, and it started with a will to persist and grow.
Yep. It depends what you talk about, will or volition, but yes, right? Like it's innately,
and does something like that begin to be the beginnings of qualifying as a will to persist and grow?
Yeah, here
it's kind of scary.
It's fascinating. I wish I had something intelligent to say about that, but consciousness is like, I meditate daily.
I do too.
In introspecting into kind of what consciousness is and what cognition is. I've been doing it for almost 17 years straight, almost every single day, and I still have no understanding whatsoever.
I do believe that we're in a collective consciousness. I mean, this is like, this is a little less mainstream of a thinking pattern.
No, I tend to, I don't know what I believe, but I feel that. Like I often. There's things
like ideas out of the ether. Where do they come from? A feeling of connectedness.
100%. And look, I mean, also if you look at history. So first of all, like a beautiful anecdote about Alan Turing. Talk about connectedness. So he had a very good childhood friend he went to school somewhere else, and he kind of felt something horrible happening to him, and he fell down and felt sick, and at the same time his distant friend had died back home, and Alan was quoted many years later to say, I knew something happened, and he said, the quote by Alan Turing that I love is, these things can be explained away, full stop, but I wonder. So that's kind of,
well, it's like, okay, so I like to put these things in scientific terms, but that's just so that I can communicate them.
Yeah, for sure.
But we don't. We need to have the wonder. I mean, and that's experimentation. Funny enough, it's always striving to know more, to learn more, but we'll never know it all. If we do, then that's boring.
Yeah.
Anyway, but from my perspective, I've experienced really weird things.
Yeah.
I knew when my grandma died. I got really, really sick when another family member passed away, and I've had weird physical, almost like telepathic connections to people before. Some of these experiences shaped, my understanding. I used to be a hardcore rationalist, and I still, in one sense, I still am, because I do think that there's a physics explanation. We just don't have the solution, and we don't need to. That's the wonder.
Yeah.
Right. But I I very much like it puts into framing like everything of like when we think of AI, AGI.
100%.
What does that look like even,
it
right?
almost feels like by design, right? Like if you look at the core of physics, the principle of not being able to know a location or a speed of a particle.
Particle duality. Wave particle duality. That they exist as both a particle and a light wave. And we can't.
Right, but also the I forget how it's said in English, how it's called in English. The inherent lack of knowing of is the principle of. I forget. Like you can either know the location.
Is it it's related to observer phenomenon?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Observing something changes.
But so it's not. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I know, and like all these things, chaos theory, all these things together, like they create this collective picture.
Yeah. So and if you go a layer down, also, so I can't call myself a mathematician, but definitely spent many years studying math. If you look at the principle of it's the German whatever, it'll come back to me. Sorry, long day. But in math, when you look at things, it's kind of even a layer below, looking at Gödel's theorems of incompleteness, like that a system of axioms, once it's complex enough to self-refer, there are statements that will be true but not provable by definition. So kind of keeping that mysticism kind of almost inherent, like this kind of not ever being able to understand like what intelligence is or whatever. I obviously these are gross generalizations, but I do feel that they permeate. So I'm like you. I definitely feel that there is a deeper consciousness to, I don't know if it's collective or but definitely one that is extends beyond us.
Yeah. And the amazing thing with what we're doing with AI, with what you're doing in biology, where you're hoping to chart the destiny of a cell, right? Where we can produce things to improve our lives, improve others' lives, improve our species' lives as a collective, give more abundance, potentially make space travel more possible. I mean, this is the other thing that keeps me in perspective. I when I'm sad, dealing with my problems as an individual, which we all have problems as individuals, right? If we're human, what resets me back is remembering that like the universe isn't beautiful without consciousness to observe it. And I want consciousness to continue to persist. And so I'm going to do whatever I can to make that happen. And I think like with the type of entrepreneur working in the biology field, but especially at the intersection of biology and AI, like both us, that is like a North Star. Yeah. Because that'll determine the ethics, the longevity, like all of what we build.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, for sure. First, I remember the uncertainty principle. So I was bugging.
Oh, the uncertainty principle. Yeah. Okay.
Number two, I was going to say when you talked about consciousness giving meaning and beauty to everything observable. So there's a beautiful saying, if you've meditated, you probably read a bunch of Buddhist writings. They say that just like pain reminds us that we have a body, suffering reminds us that we're all connected as humans. So so it's
yeah, no, it's true. Well,
this isn't an area where I thought we would go talk.
No,
I thought it was like
it's definitely related.
Yeah.
I mean, it's why we when we get to the crux of what we're doing, like not just us, but like human beings, like for purpose and impact and meaning, and it all comes back to life.
Yeah, 100%.
Right, and it all comes back to consciousness, and then it gets into these areas when we're talking about creating these things that people are afraid for good reason. Because if we misuse them, if we use them correctly, it could be the annihilation of our species. It could be the annihilation of life. But like, if we think about, like, I'm going to go back to the single cell, like this constant persistence of this cell to survive and persist until it evolved. Some of it's random if you want to go, but I'm not a nihilist. And like, I believe that there is a will there.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that we're at a critical nexus point in our species survival where we are at the pivot point of the next evolution. Because leveraging AI, I mean, it as a tool, as an extension of our own consciousness, it evolves us. And whether this is in the production of new tissues and like 10xing us, 100xing us in our output of what we can do. You mentioned literature, like all these things, it reinvents what we are as human beings and what life looks like. And if we apply it correctly, we've adapted. And we've hit the next stage of evolution in our species in intelligent life and consciousness, for all we know, until we know for sure that they're aliens, right? And if whoever knows that there are aliens, then good for you. I have not, right? But yeah, and like, as far as we know, the next stage of human of consciousness evolution,
yeah,
right? And if we do it right, that's adaptation. That's evolving. If we mess up, it could literally annihilate consciousness for all we know. And so it is worth being afraid, but it's also worth keeping the wonder, the excitement, the like optimism of it. Right.
We're kind of nearing wrapping up, but I'll say that I think that once consciousness has achieved a certain level, I think it's almost a state that cannot regress in a sense. Like it's a deep feeling. It's not anything that most progress can be taken back, but there's some that I don't think can, and I kind of feel that consciousness is one of those that once it's achieved, it will not we won't lose it. That's kind of it will be able to, even if it's sucked into a black hole, it kind of, and I think there was recently publications showing that you could reverse engineer or replicate pieces of information even going through that information is never lost, basically.
That's beautiful and fascinating and terrifying all at once. But yeah, thank you, Micha. And
thank you, Taylor.
And this was wonderful. I'm really excited for what you're doing. I'm excited for the future because of companies like Somite. So thank you.
And thank you for having me, and thank you for bearing with me as we drifted through the maze of AI, consciousness, and our future as human beings. Thank you.
My pleasure. I enjoyed it. Yeah. And so I guess I click stop now. Thanks, everyone.